Monster vs. Alien Monster. It was a warm night at the port of Tokyo, where dozens and dozens of workers were busy unloading the newly arrived ships. Suddenly they all heard a great big splash, after which there came a wave that rocked the cargo ships to and fro. Startled, the workers backed away from the ships, wondering among themselves what had caused that. When they heard something moving across the water, they all headed in the direction of it to see what it was. At first they couldn't see anything, dark as it was tonight, but soon they were able to distinguish the shadowy outline of something big moving towards the docks. None of the workers could guess what they were seeing, though some among them made half-joking comments about a kaiju of the sort so often seen in movies and other media. Their companions laughed at the suggestion, more to try and dismiss the idea from their own minds than because there was anything funny in it, but soon their laughter was cut off as they noticed a pair of glowing blue circles appear on the mysterious object as it neared the lights, circles which looked disturbingly like a pair of eyes. An uneasy muttering started up among the workers. A few timid voices suggested they should leave this place, but while all the others shared the same sentiment, no one wanted to appear a coward by being the first to go, so they all remained looking out at the approaching thing, waiting for it to get close enough that the lights might reveal its nature. But before that happened, the thing went into the water, becoming completely submerged so that no sign of it remained save for the ripples it had left in its wake. The workers exchanged glances silently, as if wanting to confirm with each other that they had all seen the same thing, wanting to confirm it hadn't been a mere hallucination. But its reality was confirmed as a giant thing rose out of the water before them, a monster with purple skin, glowing blue eyes, and two terrifying rows of fearsome teeth. With its sight fixed on them, the monster rose up to its full height, towering well over 500 feet above them even with everything below its knees being underwater, and let out a mighty roar that sent them all running, any notion of wanting to appear brave forgotten in favor of getting the hell out of there before they were crushed or eaten alive. The roar reached even well into the city itself, and soon lights started appearing on one window after another as thousands and thousands of startled people went to see what had woken them up, only to be met with a scene straight out of a giant monster movie, a strange and terrifying creature some 600 feet tall climbing out of the ocean and setting foot on the docks and turning its cold, predatory eyes towards the city's skyline. The monster was mostly human in figure, womanly, to be more precise, with its curvy hips and notable chest, but with a long tail trailing behind it and three strange frills sticking out from each side of its head, together with its face. It looked like some sort of giant axolotl monster. Yet its monstrous appearance was somewhat spoiled by the fact that it was wearing clothes, namely an orange crop top and some tight black pants, and by its silvery, shoulder-length hair. She might have been pretty if she hadn't been so terrifyingly huge, or at least hadn't been threatening to destroy their city. The monster left them in suspense for a minute, but then a devious smile spread over its face and it started walking forward, making its way through the docks towards the city proper in what was to be the start of its rampage. Meanwhile, man, I'd almost forgotten how boring it can get in here, Susan said as she bounced her foot impatiently on the floor of the underground bunker where she had been made to stay along with her fellow monsters for months. It was still fairly recently that the giant size shifter had managed to secure permission from General Munger to go out on her own, just as long as she promised not to cause any more destruction and to help out if her powers were ever needed. This was the first time she had been back since then, and already she could hardly wait to be back outside. She had come here expecting a long-awaited message from the general, but the message was apparently taking its sweet time in coming. Sighing again, she reminded herself that she only had to wait a little while longer and then her patience would be rewarded. Excuse me, Susan? Is it really necessary that I stay down here? A muffled voice said from below. Hearing that voice, Susan turned her attention down to the floor, tilting one of her feet to the side to see fellow monster Dr. Cockroach lying on the floor where her foot had been. Oh, Doctor. I almost forgot you were down there. Was my foot bothering you? To be honest, yes, very much so. Sorry about that. I'll stop bouncing it so much, but could you maybe stay there a little longer? Just until I get that message I was expecting. It really helps me relax, you know, Susan said, giving him an apologetic smile. Oh, all right, the doctor said with a sigh. Thank you so much. Susan lowered her bare foot back onto him, biting her lip as she felt his tiny little body under her sole. Since her first rampage a little over a month ago, the giantess had discovered that she really enjoyed the feeling of having someone under her foot. Previously she would have done anything in her power to avoid stepping on anyone, but ever since she developed the ability to keep everyone around her safe from harm no matter what she did to them, she had come to enjoy stepping on people as one of the simplest yet greatest displays of her power. Now it had been 2 weeks since she had last enjoyed a good rampage. When a strange giantess from another world had pulled her through a portal to help rescue her friend who was being held captive in an alien city. That adventure had scratched her itch for some fun stomping and destruction, but now she was really in the mood for it again. She had taken to stepping on Dr. Cockroach in the meantime, but as fun as that was, it really didn't hold a candle to a good and proper rampage. She really did need to get her fix soon, or else she might just forget her promise and go have herself a little romp through the nearest town. Thankfully it seemed she wouldn't have much longer to wait, as soon General Munger came flying up on his jetpack. Ginormica. We have a major situation, he exclaimed, hovering before her face. You've got a job for me, General? Susan said. She was so relieved he had finally shown up that she couldn't keep a smile from her face. How did you know that? And why are you smiling? Do you think there's something funny about Tokyo being attacked by a giant purple monster? No, General. I was just excited to finally have something to do. Well, tone it down, Missy. This is serious business. The creature, likely an alien, has destroyed hundreds of buildings so far, and current estimates put the death toll at over 100,000. The Japanese military tried stopping it, but it seems to have some sort of energy field protecting it from all our weapons. We believe you're the only one capable of stopping it before it destroys the whole city. I'll do my best, General. Good. Now follow me to the hangar, there's no time to waste. The general started flying away, with Susan following behind him. As he flew, though, he heard a sort of clacking noise coming from the floor and looked down. I think you stepped on something, soldier. Oh, right. Susan said, rubbing her foot on the ground to wipe Dr. Cockroach off her sole. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's get moving. In Tokyo, chaos erupted as the Axolotl monstergirl approached, leaving a trail of devastation in her wake. Streets were clogged with fleeing people as the air filled with screams and panicked cries. Those in surrounding buildings rushed out to try to escape the approaching danger. But this endeavor quickly proved futile, as the monster quickly drew nearer, demolishing everything in her path. Once familiar and safe buildings and streets quickly became death traps. People watched in horror as the monster swung her long tail, smashing buildings until they crumbled or fell onto the streets and the people below. Her massive feet trampled everything and everyone in her way, with loud crashes and thuds echoing through the city as the monster rampaged through it, crushing buildings and all that lay in her path. It was a sight that shook people to their very souls. They were powerless against the overwhelming strength of the mega monster and had no choice but to prepare for the worst. Those who chose to stay in the city locked themselves in their homes, hoping the monster would spare them and their loved ones, but the alien giantess showed no mercy, destroying everything in her path. People in the streets ran as fast as they could, realizing they had no chance of escaping. The monster's purple giant feet came stampeding closer, crushing everything beneath them. People screamed and tried to push in all directions to escape the inevitable fate of being flattened under her massive feet. But the streets were full of obstacles, debris falling from destroyed buildings, abandoned cars and trucks blocking the streets, and thousands of fleeing people unintentionally hindering each other's escape. The giant monster girl came closer with thunderous steps, and a feeling of desperate panic and fear spread like wildfire. People screamed and cried as they realized the terrible reality. They could not escape, and the alien being would crush them all. Many then faced the horror head-on. The enormous soles of the monster's feet were as big as whole buildings. One of these feet came down on a crowd of people, crushing them mercilessly and crunching them into the streets. Further away, dozens of office workers, who had worked long hours that day, were shocked as they ran to the windows and looked at the approaching monster with disbelief and fear. This axolotl-like giant girl moved powerfully through the city like a force of nature, leaving behind clouds of dust, fire, smoke, chaos, and total devastation. Her gigantic feet crushed buildings, cars, and people alike, and her body was so massive that she was able to break through countless buildings. The office workers were shocked and horrified as they watched the monster playfully destroy everything and approach menacingly. The windows trembled as she approached, and the ground shook under her heavy footsteps. The employees stared in shock and disbelief at the monster, having no idea what to do, and then it happened. The monster girl swung her mighty tail and smashed through the skyscraper. The shockwave that thundered through the building was enormous. Windows shattered, desks flew through the air, and ceilings and walls exploded. The employees screamed in terror as the building collapsed completely. The air was filled with the crashing and shattering of concrete and glass. While the building gradually crumbled into dust and debris, with masses of rubble raining down on the screaming people in the streets below. In the meantime, Susan was sitting on a big plane along with the general, having reduced herself to her normal human size to fit inside. Though she tried her best to keep herself under control, she was still super fidgety the entire flight, partly because of having to keep herself at such a puny size, and partly because she had never flown at this speed before, but mostly because of her excitement. For, what neither the general nor anyone else could know, was that the creature attacking Tokyo was actually a friend, Lyxe, the person she had been recruited to help rescue a couple weeks ago. After rescuing and befriending her, Lyxe had agreed to come have a rampage in Tokyo so that Susan could have something to do. And even though she had apparently caused a lot of destruction, Susan knew that Lyxe had a very high-tech bracelet capable of protecting everyone around her from harm, much like how Susan's own power worked, so none of the people of Tokyo would actually be harmed by her rampage. Of course, Susan couldn't let anyone know about her involvement in this, or else she'd get in trouble with the military again, so she kept quiet the whole journey and made an effort to keep a straight face until Japan finally came into view. "All right, listen up," General Munger said. "You'll be hopping off at the outskirts of the city since apparently the creature has a laser weapon and it might blow up the plane if we get too close. You'll have to make your way to the creature by yourself and put a stop to its rampage by any means necessary. Any questions?" "No sir, none." "Good. Now come on, they're waiting for you down there." The general went to the side of the plane and grabbed the handle of the hatch, ready to open it for her to jump out. "So glad I finally get to see Tokyo. I've been wanting to come here for so long," Susan mused, letting her smile show again. "Tokyo? Really? I thought you said you always wanted to go to Paris." "I mean, I've wanted to come here ever since I became a giant monster. You know, since this is where all the giant monster movies take place." The general frowned. "Now, remember what you're here for, to put a stop to that monster, not to have fun with your size. There are civilian lives in your hands, Missy." "I know, General. Don't worry, I won't let that creature take any more lives." "Atta girl. Now go please go," he shouted, opening the hatch for her. Susan took a jump out of the plane, smiling as she stopped holding herself down and allowed her body to expand to its natural size of some 300 feet tall. She landed on the ground a short while later, right in the middle of a street, her body making a powerful impact that shook the earth for thousands of feet around, rattling windows and setting off dozens of car alarms. Straightening up, she looked around, smiling as she saw a bunch of people roughly the size of her toes looking at her in fear and awe. She was in a residential area, she saw, surrounded by row after row of 1- or 2-story buildings which off in the distance gave way to the city's skyscrapers. Protruding from the skyline were several tall clouds of smoke, billowing higher and higher into the sky, blocking off the morning sun from this angle. That must be where Lyxe was, she thought, then looked back down at the people. She smiled at them, thinking about how it would feel to have them under her soles. It might have been fun to go chasing after them and step on them until they were all stuck to the bottom of her feet. But she didn't think she'd be able to explain something like that. Better to stick to the original plan, she thought. Sorry in advance for the destruction, little guys, but I don't have the time to be stepping around all your houses on my way to that creature. Don't worry, my powers will keep you safe no matter what happens, Susan said. Then she made a beeline straight for the smoke pillars, ignoring the street altogether and simply running through the blocks without concern for everything she crushed along the way, be it houses, cars, electric poles, or anything else. As she ran on, she kept an eye out for any people she could see and made sure to try and step on them. Some of them managed to get away from her, but she got most of them, flattening them under her soles. Some were left behind in the craters left by her feet, but others remained plastered to her soles and were made to stick along for the ride, whether they wanted it or not. Susan couldn't help but laugh in delight as she ran through the city, loving the feeling of the little people under her soles and the buildings and other stuff getting smashed up by her feet. It had been too long since she had felt this freedom, and she was absolutely thrilled to get another chance to let loose and show off her power for all to see. All right, Susan, she said to herself. Better make this count. Don't know when's the next time you'll get a chance like this. Go give these people a show they won't soon forget. As she went further into the city, she started to encounter taller and taller buildings, until she was surrounded by buildings even taller than herself. By then she couldn't walk straight through the city blocks anymore, so she took to the streets, which were much more densely packed with cars and people than the ones from before, so much so that she couldn't take so much as a single step without stepping on a person or car. Which was totally perfect for her. Sorry about all this, folks. I'd let you get out of the way, but I can't spare any time if I'm going to stop that creature. Hope you understand, she said as she unapologetically stepped on one group of people after another while they all screamed and ran away. Now that Susan thought about it, the Japanese people probably couldn't even understand what she said. Which was fine by her since it meant nothing she said could make them stop being afraid of her. The screams of the cute Asians were a delight to hear, a hymn to her might and power that struck fear in the hearts of mere humans like them. The feeling was intoxicating, there was nothing quite like it in the whole world, and it only made Susan want to take her sweet time so she could better enjoy it. Though she was still heading vaguely in the direction where she thought Lyxe would be, she slowed her pace and really took in the sights and sounds of the frightened people running, not to mention the feeling of them underfoot. A pair of women, fleeing from the Titanic woman, ran as fast as their legs could carry them, frightened by the prospect of being crushed by this monster. As they ran, a shadow fell over them and they looked up to see a giant foot coming down towards them. Screaming, they threw themselves on the ground in a last-ditch effort to save themselves, but the giant foot still fell on them, making everything go dark for them. Susan let her foot settle onto them, smiling over the sensation before taking her next step, and as she enjoyed her harmless little rampage, she wondered if Lyxe was having as much fun as her. Meanwhile, in another part of town not too far away, Lyxe roared half-heartedly as she stepped through the streets of Tokyo, barely even paying attention to where she was going. Rawr! Rawr, she said, making a weak attempt at looking menacing. It had been hours since she had first arrived at the city. Rampaging around had been a lot of fun at first, especially when the military was attacking her and she had crushed all their tanks and scattered their troops, but now she was starting to get tired. For that matter, it looked like the people were, too. They were hardly even running at all anymore. Most of them just stood on the sides of the street and looked at her as she passed by. "What's the matter with you all?" she said to them, her bracelet's translator automatically conveying her words to the locals in their own language. "Why aren't you running away scared?" The people looked at each other, then one of them spoke up to her. "We already know that you stepping on people doesn't hurt them. Why should we be scared if you can't do us any harm? He said while the others muttered in agreement between them. Sighing, Lyxe lifted her foot up and stomped down on the crowd, pinning them all under her sole and grinding them against the street. At least she could still enjoy the feeling of them under her foot. That was something she didn't think she would ever get tired of. Then, sticking her hand into the side of a nearby building, she pulled out a bunch of squirming people and popped all of them into her mouth to entertain herself by sucking on them and feeling them squirming inside. I really hope Susan gets here soon, she thought to herself. Miss Giant Monster. Down here. A voice said behind her as she did that. Turning around, Lyxe looked down at the street and saw a bunch of people gathered behind her, standing in one of the footprints she had left behind. Curious, she crouched down to get a better look at them. Miss Monster, we've all been following you on the news since you came to Tokyo, a woman among them said. We're really big fans of you, and we want to ask if you would kindly step on us. Yes, please step on us. Another of them said. We love you. You're so pretty. Please show us your feet. Give us another roar. Could you smash another building for me? Looking them over, Lyxe noticed that a lot of them were dressed up as all sorts of weird monsters. Were these supposed to be the monsters from those kaiju movies Susan had told her about? These people must be really big fans of those movies, come to greet her as the first real-life kaiju they'd ever seen. It was oddly sweet of them, she thought. Spitting the other humans back onto her hand, Lyxe sat then on the ground and gave her admirers a big smile. Well, all right. Anything for my fans, she said, rising back to her full height and letting out a mighty roar that rattled windows for a mile around and even cracked some on the nearby buildings, then spun around and smacked a building with her tail right down the middle, knocking it over into a big heap or rubble. Her admirers were cheering even as the rubble was still falling, yelling all sorts of stuff about how awesome and amazing she was. They cheered even louder as she hurt her foot over them, wiggling her toes and scrunching her soles to build their anticipation. Then she slowly brought her foot down on them until they were all flattened between her sole and the street, and she could feel a bunch of them squirming excitedly. You like that, little guys? She asked, giggling as she ground them underfoot, driving them deeper and deeper into her soft, plush sole until she was sure that they'd be firmly stuck to it. Then, newly motivated to continue playing the role of the giant monster, she roared again, this time shattering every window in a 1-block radius. It just so happened that at that very moment Susan had rounded a corner to see Lyxe standing in the middle of the street several blocks ahead, having followed her trail of destruction to get to this place. She was about to call out to her, but Lyxe's roar stunned her. It was so ferocious that for a moment she really believed that Lyxe was a fearsome monster come to destroy the city and eat everyone. But that was silly, right? Susan took a deep breath, then started walking towards Lyxe, mentally getting into her role as the city's defender to prepare for their mock battle. Once she was halfway to Lyxe, the other giantess whirled around, smashing another building with her big tail. Now she was turned in Susan's direction, and before long she had noticed her and was stomping right up to her. She stopped right before Susan, grabbed her by the shoulders, and leaned over to let out a mighty roar right into her face, causing her to fall over backwards. With Susan lying on the ground, Lyxe walked right up to her and held her foot over the shorter giantess, letting Susan see all the people stuck to her sole, then stepped on Susan's stomach, grinning playfully at her. Even knowing that this was all pretend, Susan was still a bit scared by Lyxe's display. The purple axolotl monster was much bigger than her, standing about twice her height. Susan didn't think it would be believable for her to win their battle like this. Maybe it was time she pulled out a little something she had been saving up for the right occasion. Focusing on her size-changing powers, she willed herself to get even bigger, growing from 300 feet to 500, her current maximum size, which she could only achieve with great effort. She was still a head shorter than Lyxe, but at least at this size their fight would be more believable. Susan's growth took Lyxe by surprise, and she was quick to take advantage of it by pushing Lyxe's foot off of her, sending her stumbling back while Susan stood back up. Then as Lyxe steadied herself, the two of them took on a fighting pose, preparing to do battle. The both of them stepped forward, meeting each other in the middle where they started throwing out punches and kicks that were clearly choreographed so that the other could dodge or block them as they saw fit. They grabbed and pushed at each other, through vehicles, and sometimes threw each other into buildings, both of them having a lot of fun with their fake fighting. This is so much fun. Thanks for inviting me here, Lyxe said at one point as she tried to pin Susan down. Thanks for coming. It wouldn't be nearly as fun without you, Susan said before bucking Lyxe off and landing a soft punch on her chest. The fighting went on for several minutes more before Susan signaled that it was time to end things. As she ran at Lyxe, readying herself to throw a punch, Lyxe pressed a button on her bracelet, opening a portal behind her just as Susan landed her punch, sending Lyxe flying backwards through the portal, which closed up as soon as she was through. Lyxe landed back in her garden, lying face up and still panting excitedly over her little scuffle with Susan. She'd had so much fun on Earth. Still, she was really tired and her eyelids were getting heavy. So she figured it best to take a little nap. She was about to fall asleep thinking that Susan was a great friend, but shortly after she'd closed her eyes, she heard a little squeaking noise and felt something moving on her soul. "Oh, shoot," she said, quickly sitting up and turning her foot over to see a bunch of tiny people on her foot, looking really beat up from having been under her soul during the entire fight. Most of them were her little admirers from earlier, but there were also some other people. "Sorry guys, I forgot all about you." She carefully peeled them off her foot, wondering what to do with them. If she sent them back right now, people might figure out her and Susan's little trick and then Susan would probably get in trouble. But maybe she didn't have to send them back at all. "Say, how would you little guys like living with me for a while?" Meanwhile, back on Earth, Susan had sat down to catch her breath after her fight with Lyxe, having gone back down to her usual 300 feet. After a while, she noticed some people coming closer to gather around her, a few at first, but they soon grew into a huge crowd, all of them cheering for her. She didn't understand anything they were saying, but she appreciated the attention all the same and smiled back amicably. Soon they started to crowd in closer around her, some coming up to touch her and a few even showing enough courage to try climbing her, especially around her feet. It seemed her little arrangement with Lyxe had been a huge success. Not only had she really enjoyed herself for the first time in weeks, but now she had all these people treating her as their personal hero and not even caring about all the destruction she'd caused along the way. Sometime later, General Munger came whizzing up on his jetpack to land on her knee. "Good work, soldier," he said, saluting her. "You managed to beat back that alien to wherever it came from. If that thing ever shows up again, now we know who to send after it." "No problem, General. I'm just glad I could help all these people out." "Yes. Although, apparently, it seems like the alien creature's death toll was much lower than our first estimates. It turned out all the people in those buildings it destroyed made it out alive afterwards. And so did the people it stepped on. It's all very strange." "Well, I think we should be glad." "Yes, we should be. Though there are some people missing and it will still take a long time to fix all this destruction." "Don't worry, I won't ask that you help rebuild it like last time, you've done more than enough already. Take some time to relax if you want and we'll bring you back to America when you're ready. Oh, and I'm lifting the restrictions on you interacting with civilians at your giant size. I think you've earned it after today. Just be sure to behave yourself, got it?" "Thank you, General. I promise I won't disappoint you," Susan said as he flew off, then she went back to basking in the people's praise. Yet, even with thousands cheering for her, all she could think about was when she would get another chance to protect a city again. She really hoped Lyxe would visit again soon, maybe next time they could have some fun in Europe. The end. This was an audio story by Cormany Media. Originally written by Idunnow, the link is in the description. We hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for many more stories. And if you want to support our work, then take a look at our Patreon page. The link is also in the description. This way you help us produce more content, stories, and videos. Thank you very much.